Cool. Games as art. Yeah. So, I actually do want to talk a little bit about that. I believe that video games absolutely should be an art form. And I'm afraid that, like, some genres, like the first-person shooter, are removing the ability for us to treat games as an art form. Because there's a lot of, like, of repetitive gameplay. The core loop is what they call it. The main thing you do... I'm actually going to turn down the volume here. Sorry, guys. Can I turn down... I think I can do that. Did that work? Did that make the volume better balanced? I don't know. It might just be that I have my volume balanced badly. I think that because the core loop in a first-person shooter is that you run and you shoot, and then you run and you shoot, and the times that it variates aren't that big or different or intelligent. Because of that, it begins to dilute games as an art form and make them more of a competition kind of thing, right? And I think that for some people that's what they're looking for. For some people that's what they want. But I would like to see games as an art form, as a place that you can have story and you have that core loop come up and change and mutate a little bit each time, and that change is reflected in the story. And I think that is one thing that makes a game good. And that's something that this game did very well. There was a story, a definite story, that we actually cared about, even though, like, they're blocks, right? They all had their own emotions, the things they had attached to them. They had, like, I don't know. I thought that was really good, and that it wasn't forced. If you remember back to Elementia that I played a little bit ago, the story felt very forced, very, like, painted over top of the game. And here, the story felt as if it was integral with the game, and as if it affected gameplay, right? It became a part of the whole play experience. And that's one thing that makes the game artful. For that reason, this game gets really high scores. The only issue I had with this game is that the game, the puzzles, several of them weren't so much puzzles as they were like finger manipulation things. And I would have liked to see more puzzle element, more of like me sitting there trying to figure it out, talking about it, coming up with what I could do. And I would have liked to see more of a puzzle element, I guess, because this is the game that I play on puzzle days, right? Tomorrow I'm going to be playing an RPG. Today I played a puzzle. So for that reason, it loses a few points in my book, but not many. This, I think, so really good games with me would get a $15 score. I actually, considering the length, it was a little bit shorter than I would go a $10 game for, but all the rest of it was really fantastic. I'd put this at $8.50, $9. This was very, very good. And so that's my evaluation. I'd say about $8.50, $9. And that's very high for me. If you remember back to Elementia, I gave it like a 150 score, so... let me go ahead and read Crossed Eagle's comments here for a second. She says that every genre, when it begins, is crude. When novels came out, Gothic novels were huge. They're just scary or provocative. For the time, but then along came Dickens, and same with video games. Video games started with FPS, which isn't necessarily true, and I think we'll talk about that. But now we're starting to get stories people care about, along with good gameplay. So... Katie, you are a little bit younger than this, and so am I, honestly. But video games started out with, it started out as like a board game, but with a video platform, right? And so that's why you have Atari games like Pong, which is 2-player and incredibly interactive. And the only thing you're doing is playing against either another player or the computer, right? And it's basically a board game, but in real time. And that progressed into more of a one-player feel. And I could talk a little bit about that, but I don't understand it as well as I should, considering, you know, the way I've set myself up. And then we never saw anything from the Beast from the East, did we? I don't know if he's still with us. Sorry. But then the next big genre to come about was the adventure game genre, and I don't know if you even remember this. It was basically before my time as a video game player. And the adventure games were very, very heavy in story. In fact, they were probably heavy in story to the point of a fault. It got to where they were relying more on story than they were on gameplay. And the interesting thing about the video game genre is that it has to be a very careful balance of story and gameplay. That's one reason why the Halo games were so wildly successful, is the gameplay was new and different, and every time you went into a different battle situation, it changed just a little bit. And that was what was so fantastic. Hey, well, thanks for watching Beast on the East. I really appreciate that. I'm just gonna keep ranting for a bit here. So what happened is the story element took over, and that killed the whole adventure game genre. And then the next big genre that was like death-defying, that's the wrong word. It was a big deal. It was a big fat hairy deal. Was the FPS, and we've kind of lived the last decade under the halo of the FPS. And the FPS, I think, is starting to go the other way, where we have games like Call of Duty, which are just straight up shoot, and you shoot, and then when you're done, you shoot some more, you know? And I don't know if there's a story element, but I don't see anybody playing the story element. I see people playing the multiplayer element, which is fine, but the skill level in it is all focused on reaction time, right? And I'm thinking that the FPS is going to lose on that point to games that involve more thinking and more strategy. So I think the FPS is going to lose on the multiplayer front. I think it's going to lose to the MOBA. The MOBA is already hugely popular, and people want to watch a MOBA because it has an intellectually engaging element, right? For a spectator. For a spectator, an FPS is not as entertaining because the strategy isn't as deep. Now, don't get me wrong, there's totally strategy in an FPS, but it's not as layered, right? It is literally a combat situation, and it's tactical as opposed to being long-term strategy oriented. Now, I know that's not strictly true. Don't just kill me. Because I am kind of a hater on the FPS, but it's only because I think it's more popular than it should be. Okay, I got ranting and then lost my train of thought. So the FPS, I think, is going to be scaled back, and the MOBA will take place in a multiplayer format, and the real-time strategy will always be a big deal too. I think between the MOBA and the real-time strategy, you're going to have most of your PvP. You know, you're going to have most of your player versus player action. And that means that there's this other element that games are missing out on. That's the story element. And this is a place where the MMORPG tries to marry the two concepts, the story and the gameplay being advanced through multiplayer. And I think that once you get all those together, that the MMORPG could be really valuable. In fact, it has been, and it's made Blizzard billions of dollars. Just, if you can think about the 15 million users paying, or no, it was 10 million that they got. I think they got up to 15 million at one point. Paying their $15 a month. I mean, Blizzard has a cash cow there. And evidently Warlords of Draenor is starting to redeem that franchise a little bit. So, and then I guess the other thing I want to talk about is the puzzle game, because you guys know I'm a sucker for the puzzle game. If you've watched my stream, I love puzzle games to death. In fact, I think I think that Antichamber is one of the most perfect games that has ever been developed, and that's pretty high compliment. And I think the puzzle game, if it can manage to do it, can be part of the new system. And actually, inside the puzzle game, I want to break it down a little bit because the platformer is really huge right now. And the platformer, this game was more of a platformer than it was of a puzzle game, honestly. But I think that if it manages to pull a story like this one did, and if it manages to pull the gameplay elements together, and the gameplay elements are challenging and entertaining, it'll be really successful. And I think that's the direction we're going. In fact, that's probably why we've seen a lot of activity out of the platformer genre. That, and it's easier to program than some other genres are.